The med bay smelled like copper and burned ozone, and Sergeant Dario Vasquez had learned over 3 years of deep space deployment that those two smells together meant someone was either dying or just barely not. He stood at the threshold with his helmet under his arm, and his left sleeve still rolled up from where the field medic had drawn blood 40 minutes ago, and he watched the alien girl breathe. She was laid out on the only flat surface in the emergency compartment of the Kerrigan, which was a salvage-class patrol vessel and not built for passengers, and certainly not built for passengers like her. Her body was wrong in the way that still made his crew uncomfortable, not grotesque, not threatening, just quietly impossible. 4 limbs arranged like a human's but jointed an extra time at the forearm. Skin the color of deep water at dusk, faintly luminescent where the veins ran close to the surface. A face that was almost a face, with a brow ridge that swept back like a breaking wave and eyes that were sealed now, flickering under the lids with something that looked disturbingly like dreaming. She had 2 entry wounds. One in the upper right thorax, what he hoped was the equivalent of a shoulder, and one lower on the left side, that his medic, Corporal Finn Acaffer, had spent the first 40 minutes refusing to talk about beyond the words. "I don't know what's in there, Sarge. I genuinely do not know." What they did know was this. Her blood type, if it could be called that, matched a category in the Hegemony Medical Index tagged as Vorath compatible. What they also knew was that Dario Vasquez, by a statistical miracle that the universe apparently felt was funny, was one of approximately 900 humans in the explored galaxy who carried the modified O-negative serum proteins that were tagged in that same index as a working substitute for Vorath plasma bridging compounds. He hadn't known that about himself until 20 minutes ago. "She's stable," Acaffer said from the other side of the table. He was a big man who moved quietly and had the specific manner of someone who had delivered bad news enough times that he had sanded all the edges off his voice. "For now. The lower wound nicked something I think is analogous to a kidney, maybe a liver. She's filtering something that isn't staying filtered. And the transfusion. Your blood isn't going to do what her blood does. It's a bridge compound, not a replacement. Think of it like..." Acaffer searched for something. "Think of it like putting a splint on a compound fracture. It doesn't fix the bone. It buys time." "How much time?" "If I do the transfusion now, and it works, and I want to be clear that I am not certain it will work, maybe 18 hours before whatever is happening in that lower cavity becomes unmanageable." Dario looked at her for a moment. She had arrived in 3 pieces of wreckage from a ship that no longer existed, wrapped around the only functional survival pod from a fleet engagement that had lasted 9 minutes and resulted in 0 survivors except her. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her rank. The insignia on what was left of her uniform suggested something important, but the hegemony rank structure was not something he had been extensively briefed on. What he knew was that she was alive, and that she wouldn't be in 18 hours without him. "Do it," he said. Acaffer looked at him with the specific expression of a man who has been hoping someone will say something else. "Sarge, you understand this is experimental in every meaningful sense. The index says compatible. The index doesn't say what happens to you afterward." "I know. There could be." "Finn," he said it quiet. Not hard, not an order, just his name, the way you say someone's name when you want them to stop and hear you. "She came out of a debris field. She's the only thing that came out of a debris field. I don't know who she is, but I know what that means. I'm not going to let her die on my ship because we were afraid of an asterisk in a compatibility index." Acaffer held his gaze for another 3 seconds, then picked up the draw kit. Dario sat down in the chair beside the table, rolled his sleeve back, and looked at the ceiling while the needle went in. He thought about dust. He always thought about dust when things were important, a habit from growing up in the high desert of New Mexico, where everything eventually turned to dust, where the fields his grandfather had irrigated through 40 years of drought had crumbled in the end anyway. His grandfather had been the last farmer in a line of farmers and the first man in the family to look at a dying field and say, clearly and without romance, "I can't fix this. We go." Dario had always thought that was the bravest thing he'd ever heard. The draw took 12 minutes. Akafor worked the line over to the alien girl's arm, a longer arm than a human's, with that extra joint folded back against her chest now. Her fingers curled loosely, and found what he believed was a vein and made the transfer connection. "Now," Akafor said quietly, "we wait." They waited. The Kerrigan moved through the debris field on low thrust, its passive sensors cataloging what remained of a six-ship formation that had been reduced to particulate matter and expanding gas clouds in under 10 minutes. Dario's crew, 12 people, all told, had been on the outer edge of the engagement zone doing resource survey work when the attack happened. They had seen it on passive and gone to battle stations, but battle stations on a salvage patrol vessel meant bracing for impact and praying, not engaging. The attackers, 3 vessels of Heracai design, long and dark, and equipped with weapons systems that were still largely theoretical to human intelligence networks, had completed their work and jumped out before Dario could do anything more than get his crew behind bulkheads. Then they had gone into the debris field. Then Akafor had found a survival pod with a pulse. Now Dario sat beside an alien princess, and that was what the insignia meant. He had found out when the navigator ran it through the identification archive. Not a princess in the human ceremonial sense, but something that translated roughly as a word meaning both heir to military command and the blood that decides. Important, critically, structurally important to the Vorath people in a way that went beyond rank. He hadn't told his crew that part yet. He looked at his arm, at the small bandage Akafor had placed over the draw site. He felt fine. Slightly cold, slightly lightheaded in the way you feel when your body registers a demand it hadn't prepared for. Nothing dramatic. "Her color is changing," Akafor said. Dario looked. He was right. The luminescence in her veins, which had been faded and irregular when they brought her in, stuttering, like a dying lamp, was steadier now. Slower pulse of light running from her wrist toward her shoulder, toward her heart, or wherever her heart was. "Is that good?" "I think so. I'm operating on a lot of I think so right now." Dario nodded. He understood operating on a lot of I think so. That was more or less the permanent state of his career. He stayed beside her through the first 3 hours. During the second hour she moved. Just her head, turning slightly to one side, and her fingers uncurled from the loose fist they'd been resting in. Not waking up something before waking, the body making small adjustments it doesn't make when it's losing. During the third hour her eyes opened. They were not eyes like human eyes. The iris was wide and covered nearly the entire visible surface. The color of deep amber shot through with something darker that moved like slow smoke. She looked at the ceiling for a long moment, apparently cataloging it. Then she looked at Dario. He didn't move. She looked at him with the specific quality of attention of someone deciding something. Not assessment, exactly, not threat assessment, which was what he'd expected. Something else. Something slower and more careful. Her mouth moved, no sound. "Easy," Dario said. It was a useless word in the circumstances, probably untranslatable, but it was what he had. "You're safe. You're on a patrol vessel. My name is Vasquez. I found you in the field." Her mouth moved again. This time something came out, a sound that wasn't language yet, a kind of orientation noise, rough in her throat. "Don't try to talk. You've got 2 wounds and we're keeping you stable, but you need to not move." She looked at his arm, at the bandage. Then back at his face. There was something in that look that he didn't have words for, and he wasn't going to try. "Sleep," he said. "We'll sort out the rest later." Her eyes stayed open for another 2 minutes, tracing the ceiling, tracing him, and then they closed again. Not like someone losing consciousness, like someone deciding to rest. He sat back in his chair and let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. In the morning ship morning, which was arbitrary and defined by the lighting cycle, her name was Heracai. He found this out because she was sitting up. This was not a development that HFY had authorized or predicted, and the corporal entered the medbay behind Dario, wearing the expression of a man watching someone do something deeply medically inadvisable and understanding. He had no professional authority to stop it. She was sitting on the edge of the table with her long hands flat on the surface beside her hips and her luminescent veins tracing slow patterns of dim gold light under her skin. She had found his name in the salvage crew manifest. He didn't know how, but the manifest was accessible from the ship's open network, which she had apparently navigated in the 6 hours while the humans on board were asleep. "Heracai," she said when he walked in. Her voice was low and had a harmonic quality, like two instruments being played at almost the same pitch. The translator in his earpiece rendered the consonants in a slightly flat way that he'd learned to tune out. "Of the Voreth 7th Ascendancy Fleet, you are Vasquez." "That's right. Your blood is in me." "Yes." She said nothing for a moment. The amber eyes moved over him in that slow, deliberate way. "Why?" "You would have died." "Yes. I didn't want you to die." She seemed to be processing this as a piece of information that required several operations before it could be filed. He waited. He was good at waiting. His grandfather had been good at waiting too, the specific patience of people who grow things in hard soil. "I am," she said finally, "the last of the 7th line of Ascendancy. My ship was the command vessel. All crew are dead." "I know. If I die, the 7th line has no living heir. The fleet will fracture. There will be no command structure to respond to the Heracai incursion in this sector. 11 colonies will fall." "I know that too." A pause. "You knew this when you gave your blood." He considered lying. It was a fleeting consideration. "I knew you were important. I didn't know the exact consequences. I knew you were the only survivor." "And you acted anyway." "Yes. Without knowing the outcome." "I knew the outcome of not acting," Dario said. That was enough. Heracai looked at him with that slow, dark amber attention, and something moved in it that he couldn't name. Not gratitude, or not only gratitude. Something older and more structural, the way a foundation shifts when something is placed on it that it was built to hold. "I must contact the Ascendancy," she said. "I must transmit my status and fleet command codes within," she paused, calculating, 7 of your hours, or the fracture protocols will activate automatically. "We have a long-range array. I will need access. I'll need to run that through my which means a delay." "How long?" Dario looked at HFY. HFY looked at the ceiling. 20 minutes, Dario said. Her captain, a woman named Commander Irina Szabo, who ran the patrol division from a station 3 light hours away, and who had the specific manner of someone who had been managing crises since before Dario was born, listened to his briefing in complete silence. When he finished, she was quiet for 11 seconds. "You gave your blood to a Voreth heir." "Yes." "Without medical authorization." "There wasn't time to get authorization." "There is always time to get authorization, Sergeant." "Commander, with respect, she would have been dead before the subspace ping arrived." Another silence. "She's stable." HFY says yes. "She's conscious and functional. And she needs our long-range array. Within 7 hours, or there's a command fracture in the 7th Fleet and 11 colonies are undefended." Szabo was silent for a long time. He heard her breathing. He had served under her for 3 years and knew that particular quality of silence. It was not indecision. She was arranging something. "Give her the array," she said. "Full access. You have command authority for this from me in writing to be transmitted in the next 5 minutes. Vasquez. Commander. When this is over, medical workup, full panel, I want to know everything that's in your blood that isn't supposed to be there. Yes, ma'am. And Vasquez. Ma'am. You did the right thing. She cut the channel. The transmission took 4 minutes. Heracai Vane sat at the communications console in the Kerrigan's small operations center, with her long fingers moving over human-designed interfaces that were clearly wrong for her hands, adapting to them with a focused precision that Dario watched from across the room and found, unexpectedly, moving. There was something in the image, this woman who had survived the destruction of her entire command, wounded, running on a stranger's borrowed blood, bending her strange hands to strange tools and refusing to stop. That reminded him of something he couldn't immediately place. Then he placed it. His grandfather in the field in the drought, still planting. The transmission went out. The response came back in 11 minutes. Fleet authentication confirmed, command codes accepted, the fracture protocols deactivated. Somewhere across the sector, 11 colonies kept their defenses. Heracai Vane sat back from the console. For the first time since she had woken up, something in her posture changed. Not collapse, nothing so vulnerable as that, but a kind of release, the way a wire goes slack when the tension it was holding is resolved. She sat like that for a moment. Then she said quietly to no one in particular, "It holds." Dario didn't answer. He stood at the threshold of the operations center and listened to the sound of the ship moving through space, and thought that some things were the same in every species, the specific exhaustion of holding something together until it was safe to stop. The medical workup took 3 days because Akafar was thorough. During those 3 days, Heracai Vane healed at a rate that made the corporal write 3 separate notes in his log with escalating levels of italics. The lower wound closed in 36 hours. The upper wound sealed by hour 20. By the end of day 2, she was moving through the ship with a careful, measured gait, not frailty, more like someone recalibrating, a ship's computer running diagnostics before resuming operations. The crew adapted in stages. Private Castellan, who was 22 and from Atlanta, and who had strong opinions about everything, disappeared into a state of furious research, and emerged on the 2nd day able to pronounce Heracai Vane correctly and eager to explain the Vorath Ascendancy command structure to anyone who stood near him for more than 30 seconds. Engineer T. Young-O, who communicated primarily through the medium of food, left a sealed meal container outside the medbay on the first morning. By the 3rd day, she and Heracai Vane were sitting in the galley together in a companionable silence that required no translation. Navigator Reyes continued to refer to their passenger as the princess, in tones of barely suppressed wonder, which Dario was aware and chose not to address. For his part, Dario spent the 3 days doing his job, running the salvage grid, logging the debris field, compiling the after-action report for the Heracai engagement, maintaining the ship. He checked in on Heracai Vane twice daily in the way he checked in on all personnel, direct, practical, not overladen with anything. She matched him in this. Their conversations were short, functional. He told her their heading. She confirmed her recovery status. He asked if she needed anything. She said no, and then sometimes asked a question about human shipbuilding or crew structure, and he answered it, and then they went their separate ways. He liked it. He wasn't going to examine why he liked it. On the morning of the 4th day, Akafar knocked on his bunk frame at 600. "Medical workup results," the corporal said. Dario sat up. "Bad." "Not bad, weird." Akafar came in and sat in the chair at the tiny fold-out desk. He had the tablet with him, and his face had the specific expression of a man who has spent 3 days building toward a sentence he's not sure how to deliver. "Your serology is fine. Your chemistry is fine. Your immunology is fine. But there are about 40 markers in your panel that I've never seen before, and when I ran them against the Hegemony Compatibility Index." He paused. "They match Voreth bone marrow regeneration primers." Dario was quiet. "Which means your blood didn't just bridge," Akafor continued. "It interacted. The Voreth bridging compound in your serum did what it was supposed to do in a compatible donor. It activated. It's been running a low-level biological process in her that I think," he stopped again, choosing words carefully, "I think it's repairing structural bone damage she had before the engagement. Old fractures, old calcification, things that weren't on my casualty list because she was carrying them when she arrived. She's been hurt before. A lot, over a long time. And your blood, the specific proteins your body makes that we don't fully understand yet, has been systematically addressing it." Dario looked at the ceiling. "There's something else," Akafor said. His voice had shifted, not gravity, something more careful. "The process goes both ways." "What does you mean?" "I mean your panel has new markers. They weren't there in your last physical 8 months ago. Your cellular repair indices are running about 30% above baseline. Your neuroplasticity indicators are elevated in a way that's consistent with—" He stopped. "I don't know what it's consistent with. I don't think there's human literature on this, but you're not worse. You're not sick. If anything, in every measurable way, you're better than you were." Dario was quiet for a long time. "Don't read into it," Akafor said, and his voice had a specific gentleness that he usually reserved for entirely different conversations. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just telling you what the numbers say. I know what you're not suggesting." "Okay. Thank you, Fen." Akafor stood up, tucked the tablet under his arm. "Medical recommendation is to continue monitoring. No restrictions. She heals better with you nearby for whatever biological reason. And you heal better." He paused, presumably for the same reason. He went to the door. "I'm going to go write this up in terms that won't make anybody say, 'I told you so' about the blood decision." "Good luck. I'll need it." He left. Dario sat in his bunk for a few minutes, looking at the far wall. He thought about his grandfather again. He thought about the specific thing his grandfather had said once. The year the last field died, not the brave thing about leaving, the other thing, the quieter thing, said sitting on the porch watching the dust blow. "Sometimes the thing you can't fix ends up fixing you." He got up, he put on his uniform, he went to work. The Heracai came back on the 6th day. Not to the debris field, they came to find the Kerrigan. The alert came at 3:40. Dario was in the operations center in 12 seconds, uniform half sealed, and Reyes was already at navigation with her hands flying. "Single vessel," she said. "Heracai configuration, long range, it has our transponder signature. They're tracking us. They must have been watching the field. They know we pulled survivors." Her voice was even, which was how he knew she was scared. "They're on an intercept heading at their speed." She did the calculation, 42 minutes. Dario looked at the tactical board. The Kerrigan was a salvage patrol vessel. It had 2 defensive rail systems and 1 short-range missile cluster. The Heracai vessel on the board was, he recognized the profile now, a Fang-class interdiction ship. It had destroyed 6 Voreth vessels in 9 minutes. He was aware, with complete clarity, that the math was not in his favor. "Battle stations," he said. "All crew to positions. Reyes, plot me 3 evasion vectors. I want options." "Yes, Sarge." He was turning toward the communications panel when the door opened, and Heracai Vane walked in. She had dressed her own uniform, cleaned and patched by O, in an act of mechanical kindness that the engineer had not mentioned to anyone. The insignia were intact. The long-armed jacket was sealed precisely. Her amber eyes went straight to the tactical board and her expression did not change. "They are looking for me," she said. "Yes." If they capture me, the seventh line fractures. Command falls. I know. She was quiet for a moment, reading the tactical board with a fluency that told him she had spent a great deal of her life reading tactical boards. Your vessel cannot defeat a Fang class in conventional engagement. I'm aware. I can pilot. I have a pilot. I can pilot your vessel, she said again, and there was nothing challenging in it, just fact, the way someone fluent in a language states their fluency. Voreth military pilots cross-train on human-configured systems as standard. The interface will be, she glanced at the pilot console, manageable, and I know how a Fang class thinks because I have commanded them. Dario looked at her. I know where they will expect you to go, she said. I know which evasion vectors they have already calculated. I know where the gap in their sensor sweep is. A pause. You saved my life. Let me use it. There are moments in a life, anyone's life in any species at any point in history, that are not decisions. They are recognitions. The decision was made before the moment arrived. The moment is just when you find out what you already chose. Raise, Dario said. You're on weapons, she takes the helm. Raise looked at him, looked at the alien woman, looked back at him. Copy that, she said, and stood up from the pilot console. Heracai sat down. Her hands, the long-fingered hands with the extra joint, moved over the console with the specific adaptation he'd watched before at the communications array, finding the geometry of it, adjusting to the spacing, and then proceeding with a steadiness that he found himself watching instead of the tactical board. The gap in their sweep is 17 degrees off your current port bearing, she said. It will remain for 11 minutes from now. After that it closes and we have no options. Can you get us there in 11 minutes? Yes. Then go. The Kerrigan turned. What happened in the next 11 minutes was not cinematic. There were no dramatic speeches. There was no musical swell. There was a salvage patrol vessel moving through space in a specific way, threading a specific corridor between sensor sweeps, using specific knowledge of a specific enemy's specific tactical doctrine. Dario stood at the center of his operations center and watched his crew work and watched the alien woman at the helm work and said nothing. Because there was nothing to say. Because this was the part of the work that required not words but hands and nerve, and the small practical intelligence of people who know what they're doing. The Heracai vessel completed its sweep and found nothing. It ran the sweep again. Nothing. It held its position for 3 minutes. He could see it on the passive sensor, sitting there in the way a hunting animal sits, very still when it has lost the scent, and then it changed heading. Not toward them. Away. They're not pursuing, Reyes said. Her voice had the specific quality of someone who is not yet ready to believe something. They think we jumped, Heracai said from the helm. Her voice was even. The Fang-class doctrine on a lost signature is to assume warp transit and reacquire at the target's registered home base. They will go to your station. Can they? Your station will be prepared long before they arrive. The Voreth 7th Fleet Command now knows the Heracai are in this sector. There will be a response fleet. A pause. There already is. Dario looked at the back of her head. You sent that in your transmission. I sent the coordinates of the engagement, the vessel profiles, and the probable Heracai staging area. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. You were thinking about that when you were still in the medbay. I was thinking about it when I was still in the survival pod, she said. I had 6 hours in the debris field. I was not idle. There was a sound from somewhere behind him. He turned to find that it was Private Castellan, who was supposed to be at his station, and was instead standing near the door with his mouth open. Did she just? Castellan started. Station, Dario said. Sarge. Station Castellan. Yes, Sergeant. He went. but Dario could see his shoulders shaking with what he chose to interpret as the physical response to adrenaline decompression, and not, specifically, barely suppressed laughter. He turned back to the tactical board. The Heracai vessel was receding. The sector was quiet. The Kerrigan moved at slow thrust through space that had been full of threat 10 minutes ago and was now provisionally safe. At the helm, Heracai Vane maintained her heading. He let the silence last for a minute and then he said, "Solid flying." She didn't turn. "It is your ship that flew." "It's my crew that flew," he said. "You're my crew, that counts." He wasn't entirely sure why he said that. He meant it. The response fleet arrived in the sector 31 hours later. 7 Voreth warships dropping from warp transit in a formation that lit up the passive sensors like a sunrise. Dario brought the Kerrigan to a full stop and watched them come and felt, for the first time in a week, like the smallest vessel in the area was an accurate description of his situation rather than a terrifying one. Heracai Vane stood beside him at the main viewport. They had not talked much in the hours since the evasion. They had done their work, she on the helm, because Reyes had decided, with the practical unanimity of a person who has watched someone be genuinely exceptional at something, that the assignment was good, and Dario on the management of his ship, and the crew in their respective stations. And in the small hours of the ship night, they had ended up in the galley at the same time and sat across from each other over coffee. She drank it with the expression of someone tasting something that is not what they expected and finding it interesting, and not talked about anything in particular. He had told her about the high desert of New Mexico. She had told him about the third moon of Vane's home world, where the nobility took their names, a place of red cliffs and dry air and light that came in from 2 suns at once, and where the children of the Ascendancy line were sent to learn what was worth defending. He thought those 2 places would understand each other. The lead Voreth warship opened a channel. The voice that came through was not the voice of a subordinate. "Heracai Vane, the 7th Fleet acknowledges your survival. The 3rd Ascendancy Fleet has been activated under your emergency authority. You are ordered to transfer to Flagship Command immediately." She stood at the viewport. The gold light traced her veins. She said nothing for a moment. "Acknowledged," she said. "Transfer will occur in 1 hour. The Kerrigan and her crew are to be logged as allies of the 7th Ascendancy under my personal guarantee of protection. All crew are to receive full transit rights through Voreth space." A pause from the other side of the channel. "Understood. Is there additional request?" She looked at Dario. He looked back at her. The commanding officer of the Kerrigan, Sergeant Dario Vasquez, is to be recorded in the Ascendancy archive as Vane-blooded. Another pause on the other side. The kind of pause that suggested the officer receiving the message was recalibrating several things very quickly. "You will know what that means," she said. "Record it." "By your word," the voice said, "it is done." She closed the channel. Dario was quiet for a moment. "What does that mean?" he asked. "Vane-blooded." "It is a designation," she said, "for those who have given of themselves to preserve the Ascendancy line. It is," she considered the translation, "an old word, from before we had fleets when the line was maintained by blood oaths and the people who kept them." She turned to look at him fully, with those amber eyes that moved like slow smoke. "It means you are owed a life, and that the Ascendancy acknowledges the debt openly." "I didn't do it to be owed anything." "I know," a pause. "That is why it means more." He nodded slowly. He looked back at the warships, 7 of them, the firepower to level a small moon. All of it at some level, running along a chain of consequence that started with a needle in his arm, and a decision made in 40 seconds in a salvage-class medbay, because she was the only survivor and he didn't want her to die. His grandfather had said, "You can't always see what you're planting when you plant it." He had meant it about drought-resistant grain, but like most things the old man said, It opened in multiple directions if you let it. The transfer, he said, you have to go. Yes. The Heracai in this sector, are they going to push? For a time, the Third Fleet will push back. She was quiet for a moment. What I know about their staging area, what I transmitted, it gives us a window, several months perhaps, before they regroup. And then it continues. She said it without tragedy. The way you say it when you have been fighting a long war and you have made your peace with the fact that the war is longer than you are. We'll be in this sector, Dario said. Patrol rotation doesn't change. She looked at him. He could feel the weight of her attention the same way he'd felt it in the med bay, that quality of deliberate examination, not cataloging him. He understood now, but recording him. The way you record a thing that matters. Then we will meet again, she said. Probably when something is on fire. The corner of her mouth moved. It was not a smile exactly. The geometry was wrong for a human smile, but it was in the same family. Something warm that knew what warmth was, and was expressing it in the tools available. Probably, she agreed. The transfer shuttle took her across in 50 minutes. He watched it go from the viewport in the operations center with Reyes beside him and O standing in the doorway with a coffee she hadn't offered to anyone else, and Castellan quiet for once, standing near the back with his hands in his pockets. So, Reyes said, after the shuttle had docked with the flagship, vein-blooded. Don't. I'm just saying, Sarge, that's a pretty big. Reyes. In the Ascendancy archive, permanently recorded. Navigation report, Dario said. We're stationary, Sarge, as you can see by the viewport where we are watching the Vorath flagship. He looked at her. She looked back with the specific expression of a woman who has been a navigator for 8 years and has earned her moments. Back to patrol rotation when the fleet clears, he said. Yes, Sergeant. He looked out at the flagship. It was enormous, dreadnought class, with running lights that traced the same slow patterns as the veins under her skin. He wondered briefly what it meant to step back onto something that large after a week on the Kerrigan. He wondered if the scale of it felt strange after small spaces and 12 people, and coffee at 200 with someone who wasn't supposed to be there. He thought it probably did. He thought she would manage it anyway. 3 months later, the Heracai pushed. The Kerrigan was on the outer edge of the sector, running a survey grid when the engagement broke out. It was larger this time, 12 Heracai vessels against 7 Vorath warships, with human assets caught in the middle because 3 resource platforms and a transit station didn't come with the option of getting out of the way. Dario ran his crew to battle stations and called Shabo and got the same order he expected. Protect the civilian platforms. Do not engage directly. Do not die. The engagement lasted 9 hours. The Kerrigan ran evacuation runs between the platforms and a safe zone 3 light minutes out, moving people while the warships held the line. It was not glorious work. It was loading frightened civilians into insufficient cargo space and flying carefully through debris and doing it again. Castellan managed the loading. O managed the life support load. Reyes managed the math of how many trips, at what intervals, against how much time. Dario managed the ship. On the 6th run, a Heracai frigate broke through the defensive line and came after the transit station directly, and the Kerrigan was between them. He put his ship between them. It was not a decision, it was a recognition. The frigate fired twice. The first shot took out the aft sensor array. The second hit the hull 3 frames back from the engine compartment and did things to the structural integrity that Dario felt in his teeth. The Kerrigan rocked and held, and he pushed it to maximum thrust on a heading that crossed the frigate's bow, drawing its fire, buying the transit station 50 seconds. 50 seconds was enough. The frigate was destroyed by a Vorath warship that dropped from the engagement line with the specific targeted violence of something that had been watching and waiting, and chose its moment. Dario got his ship straight. He held the helm himself. He felt the damaged frame through the controls of vibration, a catch, the specific complaint of structure under stress, and he managed it because that was the job. The engagement ended in the 9th hour. The Heracai pulled back. The sector held. The Kerrigan limped to the nearest station with a 3-meter breach in the aft section, a destroyed sensor array, and everyone alive. While O and the damage control team worked the breach, Dario sat in the operations center and wrote his after-action report. He was halfway through the section on asset protection outcomes when the communications board lit up. Voreth flagship, 7th Ascendancy. He answered. She was at the other end. She looked different, not worse. There was a quality in her that had been stretched tight the last time he saw her, and it had either resolved or been replaced by something else. Not relaxation, nothing so simple. A kind of weight that comes from command of real stakes, and the way some people carry that weight and become larger for it. You put your ship between the frigate and the station, she said, without preamble. It was in the way. Sergeant. Commander. A pause. She looked at him for a moment with those amber eyes. Your hull breach, she said. My engineering team can address it. I'm requesting you bring the Kerrigan to the flagship for repairs. We have a station. You have a station with inadequate hull plate stock for your damage classification. I have checked. A pause. It is not a request. It is, she considered, a recommendation, strongly held. He looked at the after-action report on his screen. He looked at the communications panel. He looked at the specific quality of attention being transmitted across 3 light minutes of space by a person who had rebuilt her fleet command from a survival pod and a borrowed blood transfusion, and a message sent in 4 minutes on a human communications array while she was still healing. On our way, he said. The repair took 2 days. He spent most of them on the flagship, which was in fact enormous and made the Kerrigan look like a lifeboat, and had corridors that were wider than his entire operations center, and smelled like something that wasn't iron or ozone but some other mineral thing, clean and sharp. She showed him the Ascendancy archive room on the 2nd day. It was a long hall, long by any standard, with data columns rising floor to ceiling, and the columns ran names and dates and deeds and characters he couldn't read, but she translated the relevant entry. Vasquez Dario, human, Kerrigan-class patrol vessel, vein-blooded, year of first engagement. Under it, in a smaller notation that she translated last, were 3 words that she said came from the oldest form of the Ascendancy oath. He asked what they meant. She was quiet for a moment. The blood remembers, she said. It is what we say about a debt that cannot be counted. That existed before accounting was invented. A pause. It means you will not be forgotten. It means the Ascendancy has looked at you and knows what you are. He stood in that long hall with the columns rising around him and the quiet hum of a warship under his feet, and thought about dust and drought and his grandfather planting things in hard soil. My grandfather used to say, he told her, that you only get one life, but if you spend it right, it plants things that last. She was quiet beside him for a moment. He was a wise man, she said. He was a farmer. Sometimes they are the same. He smiled, looked at the archive, looked back at her. What happens now, he said, with the Heracai? They will not push again this season. The 3rd Fleet holds the corridor. A pause. But they are patient. They will find another angle. Another sector. She looked at the archive. This will continue for some time. I know. And you will still be here. It was not a question. It was the thing she was checking, the way you check a foundation before you place something important on it. I'll still be here, he said. She nodded once, small, deliberate. They walked back through the flagship in the comfortable quiet of people who have been through something together and come out the other side. And he thought that this was how it went. Not with declarations, not with speeches, but with the slow accretion of ordinary moments shared between people who had decided, without making a ceremony of it, that the other one mattered. He returned to the Kerrigan the following morning. The ship was repaired, the hull held. The sensor array was new, better than the original. O had spent the 2 days shadowing Vorath engineering in a state of professional rapture, and had come back with 3 notebooks full of material and an expression that suggested she would be processing it for months. Castellan had somehow acquired 2 volumes of the Ascendancy historical texts in translation, and was already on the 2nd chapter. Reyes had computed 3 new patrol routes through the sector, using the Vorath stellar mapping data she had accessed via the flagship systems with, technically, full authorization, and had simply used the access to do more than she'd been authorized for. He didn't address any of this. He sat in the pilot seat, not Reyes's position, his own, the one he never used when things were calm, and looked out at the sector. 11 colonies, 7 warships, 1 repaired salvage patrol vessel, a sector that had been on the edge and was now provisionally not. A name in an archive hall, a debt that could not be counted, blood that remembered. He thought about what his grandfather had said, the brave thing, the leaving thing, the thing about a dying field and the courage to go. He thought Heracai Vane had the same courage in a different form, the courage to stay, to hold the line that was supposed to fracture. To sit down at a strange console with strange hands and fly a strange ship through a gap in an enemy's sensors, because she had been thinking about it for 6 hours in a survival pod in a debris field where everyone else was dead, and she had decided she was not finished. He thought there were different kinds of grit, his grandfather's kind, his own kind, hers. He thought they were all the same thing, just in different dialects. Sergeant Reyes said from navigation, "We're being hailed." By who? Flagship. He straightened, answered. No video this time, audio only. Her voice, low and harmonic, slightly flat in the earpiece consonants. "Safe passage, Vasquez." "Safe passage," he said. A pause, 3 seconds. "I will tell you something," she said, "that we say at fleet departures, a Vorath saying it is old." He waited. "Wherever you go," she said, "you go carrying what you gave, and what you carry cannot be taken." He held the channel open for a moment. "We have a saying too," he said, "where I'm from in the desert. Tell me. Even a dry field knows the shape of rain." A pause on the other side. The quality of it was the quality of something being considered and then kept. "Yes," she said, "that is right." The channel closed. The flagship turned. The warships turned with it. The Vorath 7th Ascendancy fleet moved away from the sector on a heading that would take them to the next crisis, the next corridor, the next place where 11 colonies needed someone to hold the line. Dario Vasquez watched them go. Then he turned back to his ops center, to his crew, to his ship that was small and repaired and humming at low thrust, to the sector that was his responsibility and his ground, to the job that was never finished. "Back to patrol rotation," he said. "Yes, Sergeant," said Reyes. And the Kerrigan turned and went back to work.